First off, thanks to all of you that tweeted your hashtag NFL draft questions to me. I appreciate it. You gave me enough questions to where I had to come on here in the middle of the week and do an NFL draft Q&A. I plan on doing another one on Sunday, so make sure you go to @pfspot_Schlegel on Twitter and tweet your draft questions using hashtag NFL draft. Let's get started with this Q&A though. Abel E. Herrera asks, what are your thoughts on Nick O'Leary from FSU, and what round do you see him being drafted? This is a pretty weak tight end class. He's a top 5 tight end talent in this draft, maybe top 3. I'm not really sure, frankly, what that says. I look at him and I see a guy that's maybe a 4th-round pick in my mind at this point. I need to watch him more closely before I give you a final opinion. But at this particular moment, what round would I say a Nick O'Leary should be drafted in? Probably around round number 4. 35 Robert 16 asks, why did Devin Funchess drop in your mock draft? A couple of reasons. Number one is that now that I've had the chance to really go back and start more in-depth watching more players and more of them, I'm starting to better formulate my opinions. Like, I'm on the offensive side of the ball. I'm done with quarterbacks. I'm pretty much done with wide receivers. I'm on to the running backs now. You know, players that I've all watched at some point in time, but I haven't really watched in depth. I have to remove myself from the season, try to block out all the things that I'm hearing in terms of what people think about them and just focus on what I see. And what I see in Devin Funchess is a guy that probably is better suited at this point to play tight end at the NFL level as opposed to wide receiver. My concern is that I don't know that he can consistently get separation at the NFL level. Now, to be fair, I was wrong about Alshon Jeffrey in that sense, and I thought Alshon Jeffrey was a guy that wasn't going to be able to hack it at wide receiver in part because of his inability to get consistent separation. And excuse me, maybe Funchess falls into that category. But right now, I look at this wide receiver class. It's got a lot of really good prospects. I just can't put Devin Funchess in the first 2 rounds, maybe not even in the first 3 rounds as a wide receiver. I just can't. Too many other guys with better speed, too many other guys with better ability to get separation, too many other guys with better ability in terms of making explosive big-time plays. You know, Funchess is a guy that could end up being a steal for somebody, but at this point in time, based off of what I'm seeing, he's a 3rd or 4th round pick. Mika Kivy asks, is Rakeem Cato overlooked after 4 years of great success, had numbers as a starter, to not even being invited to the combine? No. Because if they don't really view him as a NFL prospect, then why invite him? I don't really see it. You know, just because he was successful and he had numbers at college does not necessarily equate to being an NFL starter. So, you know, I don't think he was overlooked. Jay McClurg, 9243. If Landon Collins falls to the Steelers, should they take him? Your simple answer is yes. The needs for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 2015 NFL Draft are as follows. Defensive back, defensive back, defensive back, defensive back, pass rusher, defensive back, pass rusher, defensive back. Some type of configuration. Landon Collins, I think, is more of a top 20 talent than a top 10 talent because he is primarily an in-the-box safety. I think that is a good range for him to go, and maybe perhaps just a tad bit of a steal in a very weak safety class for the Steelers to get a guy like Landon Collins at number 22. If they got him there, you got to take him. You got to take him. At Real Jonathan, if Dorial Green-Beckham didn't have the great amount of baggage with him, where would he really go in the draft? Oh, top 5. He'd be the number 1 receiver in this class. Without the bullshit, without the baggage, he is the number 1 receiver in this class. Not Kevin White, not Devontae Parker, not Amari Cooper, not Jalen Strong, not Devin Smith. It's Dorial Green-Beckham, and probably by a good distance. You know, when it comes to my actual ranking of the wide receiver prospects, I'm not sure where I'm going to slot in Dorial Green-Beckham just yet, just because you do, I think, have to factor in that off-the-field baggage and the drama that could come with him. And the fact also that he didn't play at all in 2014. Missing that year of time is costly. But, man, from a physical tool standpoint, he's got more of them than anybody else in this draft. From a pure physical standpoint, he's the number 1 prospect by a good margin. And again, I emphasize a good margin. When I see him, you know, I see a guy that could really, truly be that number 1 wide receiver at the NFL level. He's a guy that reminds me some of A.J. Green. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Vincent Jackson. And I think for those people that make that comparison, right team, wrong guy. I see more Mike Evans. But again, like I said, excuse me, if he didn't have the off the field baggage, Dorial Green Beckham is the number one wide receiver prospect in this class. Period. Jay the Dirty Biscuit. Will Sammy Coates be a bust? I don't know. I think you have to be concerned about spending a really high pick on him, even like in the early portions of round number 2, because there's a guy with that speed and explosiveness component. Reminds me quite a bit of Roddy White, when he was coming out of UAB. However, with that said, I have concerns about Coates' ability to run routes, his ability to get separation with something else other than just vertical speed. I have concerns about his hands. I have a lot of concerns about him, and let's face it, he didn't exactly play in a system that was going to showcase his skills at the wide receiver position. There were times where I watched him on film, and my eyes ended up getting drawn more to Duke Williams, his teammate on the other side. So I won't go so far as to say Sammy Coates will be a bust, but I could understand why some people would think that way and have some concerns about him. Mark_Wayland67 asked, do you agree with me in thinking the Dolphins should draft Melvin Gordon in round 1 this year? Not at 14. If they're going to draft offense at number 14, and if they stay there, I think it's got to be wide receiver or maybe even an offensive lineman again. Why not? For my money, Melvin Gordon's not the number 1 running back in this year's draft. And when I'm looking at a running back taking him at number 14, I don't think Melvin Gordon is quite the speedster that a lot of people make him out to be. And his combine time kind of bears that out a little bit. You know, when people talk about these Jamal Charles comparisons, I get some of what people see, and I get why some people would maybe say that. However, with that said, I don't see that because Jamal Charles was a 4.33 or 4.35 guy coming out of Texas, whereas Melvin Gordon's running 4.52. And when you flip on the tape of the two, Charles has more speed and explosiveness overall than Melvin Gordon, even though sometimes a 40 can be a little overrated when it comes to measuring explosiveness. Actually, when I look at Melvin Gordon, I see more Matt Forte. If I was going to say anybody that he reminds me of, even though he's a little bit smaller, I see more Matt Forte than I do Jamal Charles. Would you take Matt Forte with the 14th pick in this draft? Absolutely. So maybe I've just totally contradicted myself. But in this case, I don't think Melvin Gordon's the best player on the board or the best fit for the Dolphins at that particular point in time. That's just my opinion. I like the focus on the offensive side of the ball, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins took a defensive player there. Slider 15, what are the odds that Mariota is there at 4 for the Raiders for them to try and extort picks from somebody? Not very good. I really don't think he'll be there. I really don't. The action with Mariota is probably going to be at number 2. Either he's getting drafted there by the Titans or somebody else is trading up to get him. I'd be stunned if he was there at number 4. Now, to me, again, the Raiders at number 4, my money, I would still take Mariota, but, again, that's just me. With that said, though, if they were able to get a really good package of picks from somebody else to be able to move down a few slots or several slots, then obviously the Raiders have to seriously explore that. Alex Shirley 10, who's the best running back in this year's draft? I haven't formally made up my mind, but I know from my money that it's not Melvin Gordon. It's not Todd Gurley. The 2 running backs that stand out to me the most are even Tevin Coleman from Indiana or Duke Johnson from the U. I love me some Duke, man. If he could stay healthy and work on his ball security a little bit, I think he reminds me a lot of Shady McCoy. He's a guy that can really, really make some big plays, both as a rusher and in the passing game as a receiver, better than maybe anybody else in this running back class, including Melvin Gordon. And Tevin Coleman reminds me an awful lot of DeMarco Murray. So one of those 2 guys will probably end up as the number 1 rated running back on that board, and the other one might be my number 2 running back. You might see Gordon at 3 and Gurley at 4. I'm not guaranteeing that at this point, but don't be surprised if you see that from me. So if that pisses you off, you can bitch about it in the comments now and have at it. But for my money, I don't think it's Melvin Gordon. At Sackmaster 101, should the Rams cut Sam Bradford? Yes. They must move on from Sam Bradford. If they could get somebody to trade for him, even better, but you got to move on from him. You cannot seriously, if you're the Rams, with a straight face say you take your business seriously in 2015 if you're still counting on Sam Bradford to be your starter. That's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And should they trade up to take a quarterback in the first round? It depends on what the price would be. I mean, they need a quarterback really bad. But, if they were moving up from 10 to, let's say, number 2 to get Mariota, do they want to give up a RG3 type of package to get a Mariota? I don't know about all that. This is where they're really hurt by not having a Connor Cook declare for this year's draft, because he would have been that third quarterback. He would have been a guy you could have taken in the first round, and he would have been a guy that the Rams could have either had sit there fall into their laps at number 10, or even maybe only have to trade up a couple of picks to like a pick 6 with the Jets or 7 with the Bears or 5 with the Redskins to be able to get him. Anthony James TV. Is O-line or wide receiver the bigger need for the Vikings at pick number 11? I think the bigger need is offensive line. I think the better value at that pick might come from the wide receiver position or maybe even on the defensive side of the ball. Now, I'll say this for the Vikings. You're building your team around Teddy Bridgewater. That next year, that first pick should be on the offensive side of the ball. That's the way I think a championship team is built, should be built. But again, I don't know if that's a guarantee that that's what they're going to do, but I think that's very possible. I think it's either down to offensive lineman or a wide receiver here, and I think it could end up being a wide receiver, whether Cooper falls to them or Devontae Parker. Who knows? It probably won't be Dorial Green-Beckham. I can't see them with the issues they had with Adrian Peterson taking DJB with his domestic violence history and his background. Georgian Fulia. Last year you wanted so much for the Bears to take Aaron Donald. Who is your favorite this year? My favorite player or my favorite guy that I want the Bears to take? That's the follow-up question I have for you. Last year was a combination. My favorite prospect to watch was Aaron Donald. That's why he was a top 5 prospect on my board, and of course I was proven right in that case. Not always right, but man, when I'm right, I'm really fucking right. And I was really fucking right about him last year. I really was right about him last year. And I wanted the Bears so desperately badly to take him. And they were one pick away. One pick away. It's something that's going to gnaw at me for years. I love Kyle Fowler, and I was very happy when the Bears took him. But Kyle Fowler is no Aaron Donald. And I'm just devastated the Bears didn't end up with Aaron Donald. Even though now with their switch to a 3-4 scheme, how would have Aaron Donald fit? Oh, I tell you how you'd fit. You've been a fucking stud. He's been a defensive end. And fuck, you can line him up at outside linebacker. He's such an athletic beast. My favorite for the Bears this year. I have a few favorites. Not necessarily all just in round 1 either. But Danny Shelton, the nose tackle from Washington's got to be on there. The Bears are moving to a 3-4. You've got to have a nose tackle to be able to run the 3-4 defense effectively. If they went with an edge rusher, I really, really like Dante Fowler from Florida. I really, really do. An explosive player who uses his hands incredibly well and can do a lot of different things besides just rush the passer. He's not a one-dimensional player. Later on in the draft, if a Shaq Thompson was there in the second round, I would jizz myself if the Bears were able to end up with him. Those are a few of my favorite prospects in this draft, but there are others too. But at this moment and point in time, assuming that Mariota won't be there at 7 and the Bears can't trade up from 7 to get him, because that would be my number 1 option, after that, it's got to be Danny Shelton at this moment. Omer H82 asked to close out this Q&A, will you do a video about your big board before the NFL draft? Yes, I will. When I do the individual prospect rankings for each position, at the end of that, I will give you a big board of quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, if that makes sense. And then at the end of it, I'll probably do all one big, huge board. Just so that way we have it for reference sake. Although I don't always like doing the one big master big board, and the simple reason why is because it's hard to do that from a general sense. When NFL teams are doing it, they're setting their boards based off of what they look for in their systems, both offensively and defensively. So when you're in the outside looking in and you're trying to do it for an entire draft and just do it in general, it's a little difficult because you might have a guy slotted as a top 20 pick, but a lot of other teams only have him as a 3rd round pick because of his systematic fit. You get what I'm saying. So anyways, thanks to you guys that tweeted your hashtag NFL draft questions. Make sure you go to at @PFSpot_Schlegel on Twitter and tweet some more hashtag NFL draft questions. I'll have another NFL draft Q&A coming up this weekend, so stay tuned.